Hi, my name is Denise Neo, and I'm going to be discussing the topics about who I am and who I want to be. Discovering who you are and accepting yourself is one of the very first steps, I think, in helping you figure out who you want to be overall and feel more happy and complete with yourself. From the moment we are born, we are given loose beginner labels about who we are. Here's me from birth. Not really much to it. My name is Denise Neal, as mentioned. I am female. I am born in a hospital in Waterbury, Connecticut, and the only other details that can describe who I am as a person are things such as weight and length, etc. Moving on, as we grow up during childhood, we establish personalities, interests, and dislikes. I have a family friend who goes by the name of Aldrin. Here's some photos of him and I because we don't have any recently together. I do in fact have permission to use photos of us together by his parents. I should just mention that. He's about 8 years old, and I thought it'd be cool to see what his response to the question, who am I and who do I want to be, is. His answers to the question of who he was, he said, I'm Aldrin, I'm good at Fortnite, I'm strong, and he gave a few other answers that were kind of basic and similar, just like that. And when asked about who he wants to be, he said he wanted to be a firefighter. As long as I could remember, I used to preach about how I wanted to be a vet and that I loved animals and I wanted to save them and take care of them. And honestly, that lasted until I was about in 7th grade, because I think as we grow up, we begin to have deeper thoughts about things and have opinions that are backed up by information that we learned. And you can believe that once realizing the amount of work that it takes to become a vet, I said no thanks. No thanks, because understanding my abilities and how I manage work, I can think about how that would probably not be the best career for me. Growing up, you start to think about your core values and think about characteristics that distinguish you from anyone else. Self-acceptance means that you understand who you truly are and where your strengths and weaknesses lie. You know what you want, and this allows you to be comfortable in a world with yourself. The question is, why is self-acceptance so important? I believe that it's important because if you do not accept yourself for who you really are, you will create a number of problems in your life, and I think that some of these problems are internal, that can affect your personality, and some will affect how others treat you and how others view you. And a lot of people tend to fall into this trap of not accepting who we are and wanting to be someone else. And this can really result in low self-esteem, basically you living a lie, unhappiness, becoming a victim, and not having any trust with yourself. Amongst the topic of self-identity and self-acceptance, I can talk about a book that I've been reading in class by the name of Siddhartha. And in this book, it's just about this man named Siddhartha and on his journey to enlightenment. And I thought how the book correlates to the idea of identity is that, or better said, it allows you to view things in a different manner. So in Siddhartha, changing his identity allowed him to have a new view on the world. So after leaving the Samanas with his best friend Govinda, they both decided to follow the teachings of the great Buddha, but Govinda had decided to stay, but Siddhartha thought that wasn't really the path that he had wanted to choose. And during this time, they had a discussion where Siddhartha basically says, I shall no longer be instructed by the Yoga Veda or the Aharva Veda or the ascetics or any other doctrine whatsoever. I shall learn for myself to be a pupil of myself. I should get to know myself, the mystery of Siddhartha. And that was found on page 36. Shortly after this, Siddhartha went to bed and got up, and within himself he felt transformed, as if mentally and physically he had released his past and he was starting a new beginning. In the book, a quote from Siddhartha and his new beginning was, all this had been, and he had never seen it. He was never present. Now he was present and belonged to it. Through his eyes he saw light and shadows. Through his mind he was aware of moon and stars. And this was on page 38. Siddhartha spends many years living in a completely different identity than when he was a Brahmin. It isn't until he faced Govinda again that he realizes the reasons why he's become so far removed from his former identities. On the topic of releasing your past, I feel like we all can relate to this idea that if you are going to accept things that are in your present and your future, especially with yourself, you're gonna have to accept who you were, and if you did not like who you were, then you change it, and if you do like who you were, then continue to be that person. But at the same time, the past is the past, and that's something that you can't ever get back, so you shouldn't dwell on that time. So in the book, Arthur was on a quest for knowledge. That's what he wanted. He wanted to know as much information as he possibly could. He wanted to feel enlightened. And that created an ego within himself that simply just took over everything this caused. His departure from training with the Brahmins and the priests, as well as training with the ascetics. A quote from the story that I pulled out was, losing himself in pleasure and power, in woman and money. He had become a merchant, a dicer, a drinker, a grasper, until the priests and the samana inside him were dead, on page 88. Siddhartha basically needed to completely omit his past identities in order to acknowledge his vices and release them. So in conclusion, finding who you are has a significant importance in helping you decide the kind of person you want to be. At this point, I've not fully gathered and noted everything that has made me me, but from many things I've discovered and accepted about myself, I do indeed have a clear idea of who I want to be.